This is Moments That Matter. This is a podcast about the moments in our lives that have long-term consequences that determine the path of our lives and especially determine our vocation. Parker Palmer has written a book called Let Your Life Speak, Listening for the Voice of Vocation. And in it, he talks about the Quaker tradition of the Clearness Committee. This is a tradition in which older, wiser people are called in to ask questions of someone making a life choice. And they don't provide any answers, they just ask questions. And this is to provide some kind of clarity for the person who is having to make this decision. We don't have a Clearness Committee, most of us, but we do have these Clearness Committee moments, these things that take place in our lives. And if we're paying attention to them, they can tell us a lot about this path that we need to be taking. Sometimes we pay attention, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have God in mind in these moments, and sometimes we don't. And even if we don't, sometimes those moments are redeemed, the path is redeemed, and sometimes it's not. And so we are here just to talk about life with each other and with others, and to try to get a sense of when do these moments come along and what do they look like, and hopefully provide everyone listening with some clarity in their own lives, in their own moments that matter. So today, I'm talking to Scott Williams. Scott is the online chaplain at Southern Wesleyan University. He is faith integration czar here, and informs all of us when we mess up on that with our online courses. And he is also a Zoom producer extraordinaire. So I guess we can start with that and just ask, is this something that you saw yourself doing at any point in your life?
I can say 100% definitively, no way, had no clue, not at all. I think growing up, I viewed life as something that, it's kind of in the future. Got to get a 4-year degree. I don't know what I want to do in a 4-year degree. I get the degree and then sort of decide. In fact, I started out in marketing and computer information systems development. And that was what I thought would be the best bet, safest bet within my wheelhouse of things that I figured I could handle. And I was pretty sure that this was not on the radar back then.
Okay. And were there moments, or was there a moment that you felt like you were departing from your initial plan?
Yeah, so this was big. This was a Clearness Committee moment for me. My senior year, I was taking an overloaded semester, my last semester, to work on senior sim projects for 2 majors. And it was almost as if right after the Christmas season, the start of the spring semester, my passion really began to wane for any scrap that had been there, really began to wane for what I was working on. And I just found myself asking this wonderfully ethereal question, is there more? Is there more than this? And I think what really did it for me was thinking, do I want to spend the rest of my life convincing people to buy something that they don't really need in the marketing world? And I don't think it's quite that simple, the marketing world, and it's a wonderful world. But I thought, I just really don't want this. And every day seemed to bring a new holy desperation of emptiness, and I just can't imagine doing this for the rest of my life. And so I always have loved to read. My mom's mother instilled a love of reading in our family because she herself, when she was young, was not allowed to read. She was told, if you got time to read, you got time to be working, so let's choose the latter. And she and her sister would sneak books into the house. And so she always taught us a love of reading, so I always had a fantastic relationship with our library of where I grew up. And I picked up a book one day, and it on the back said, "Don't read this book if you're not prepared to be totally transformed." Something to that effect. Those weren't the exact words. And I saw it kind of as a challenge. I'll read your book and I will not be transformed. The book was by Elizabeth Elliot and was In the Shadow of the Almighty, about her beloved husband, Jim Elliot, missionary who was martyred in the 50s along with 4 others down in Ecuador by the Auca Indians. And as I started reading that book, I was completely gripped, lost within the tales of his time at Wheaton, his time spent with Elizabeth, his time on the mission field. And this was the quote that was on the outside of the book that was within his story. And we hear all the time, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." And those words were seared in my mind. And I thought, I'm not doing this. I'm majoring in these things and I have no desire. And it was as if the door was thrown open to the world of possibility. And I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go on a mission trip. Never been on a mission trip. Grew up in the church quite faithfully. Never been outside the country. Never flown on a plane, period. And my senior year, applied to go to Kenya for 2 months during the summer. And I thought, this is a good time to go. It'd be no problem after I graduate. And we were informed right before we left that Kenya had been experiencing a time of unrest and the trip was hanging in the balance. All these days I'd been practicing my meager Swahili for naught. And they were able to redirect the trip. And we went to Ghana on the west coast of Africa. And I graduated, no fanfare, glad I'm finished. The exciting part was jumping on a plane, flying to West Africa, and I landed. It was probably 8 or 9 p.m. The humidity was 132% when the plane door opened, and I stepped foot off the plane, and I felt like I just came home. This was where I have been living all these years. And the next 2 months were the most transformative and incredible 2 months. I come back, hey, I don't want to major in any of this. I want to go to the ministry. And there we were.
Wow. Okay. So have I ever told you that I actually heard Elizabeth Elliot speak?
Really?
In the flesh.
I never had the opportunity.
I was
During
at Urbana 76.
Really?
She was one of the plenary speakers.
Incredible.
Quite moving.
Incredible. Absolutely.
So how was the transition to ministry?
Not without its own difficulties. I had lived in a world where if you did something other than what you majored in college, you kind of brought shame to those fools. What were the 4 years worth? All this effort, or 5 for some people, maybe 6, I don't know. And you're not doing what you got a degree in. And so I thought, my goodness, I've gotten all this higher learning in something I have no intention of doing anything with. And so I came back after that mission trip, worked for a year, and saved up money to go to seminary. And it was I feel like my first sort of clearness committee was headed by Jim Elliot posthumously.
Mm-hmm.
My clearness committee that I really wanted for this step into seminary really was not overly supportive. Not that it wasn't supportive, the people around me, but I didn't have a very clear sense of absolutely this is what we're going to do and this is right. It was kind of like I'm waiting in here and I believe this is the next step. I believe this is the next season. And that was something that would be confirmed in the midst of that time, not so much on the front end of it. Departing from what I had been working on to something entirely unrelated seemed to be a bit foolhardy. Yet my goal was quite certain. I was going to go to seminary and I was going to go back on the mission field. That was for sure.
Yeah, not unlike the Israelites and having to step into the Jordan.
Where are we going?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so which did you do first? Did you do missions work or did you do church work?
Yeah, so I spent 2 fantastic years in seminary, and I had previously done some church work just with our local church, and I was just gung-ho about making it back to Kenya. I wanted to go to Kenya. I was able to go after our unfortunate redirected trip to Ghana, and just fell in love with the place, fell in love with the people. So I said, I'm going indefinitely. And so in 2006, I arrived and spent the remaining part of 2006, first part of 2007, up until about September. And we were supposed to come back home for a time of team that I had been with had already left. I had been there for just a little over a year, and it was come back home, let's regroup, and then we're sending a new fresh batch out in January. And so I felt like, okay, I got a few months off, and I was supposed to go back 1st of January, and the end of December rolled around. They had elections in Kenya that went awry, and the peaceful, steady existence that we had experienced all of a sudden was out the door. We had where our base was there in the slums outside of Nairobi was in a pretty big hotbed of conflict. There was a lot of tribalism and ethnic cleansing even that went on. 1,000 people were killed. About I think maybe 250,000 people were displaced. And I got word, you can't go back. No, I can go back. I'll lay low. This will blow over. We're not sending any teams. We're not sending you back. And so here I am. It's 2008, January, and I have no clue. I thought I was going to live and die. And yeah, I was ready. The old tales of missionaries packing their belongings in coffins and going out. And then I realized, wow, this was really just a season. The Lord gave me peace, and I recognized that season is over. Now, what next? Where's my clearness committee? Mm-hmm. A friend of mine said, hey, while you're waiting on what to do next, why don't you do a little substitute work here at the school that she taught at? She worked with an enrichment center where students had some learning disabilities, worked with them. So I filled in there, and a church called and said, we need somebody just to fill in. So here I'm filling in, substitute teaching, filling in for a church, no problem. I'm filling in for the church, knowing that they're diligently working on their pastoral search. And 1 month turned into 2, 2 into 3, 3 into 4, 4 into, maybe you could hang around a little bit. And I said, okay. I'm just filling in on Sunday morning, still looking for what I'm supposed to do. And then clearness committee strikes again. Walking on the beach of Myrtle Beach. I could go to the same sand dune right now that I was standing on. And a friend of mine called, had just become the administrator of a school. And he said, I want you to come here and teach. And what I would be teaching would be computers. Thought I'd never do that ever. And teach some ethics and philosophy, both of which I had plenty of experience in at a private school. And early in my life, I said, there is no way I'd ever be a pastor or a teacher. No way. Absolutely, I'd never entertain it because it's way too much work. You got to work with all these people. Maybe I'm a bit introverted. And so I said, okay. And it was one of these, let me pray about it, but I already know what I'm going to tell you. Let me pray about it. I know what I'm going to tell you. Hang up the phone. And if I've ever heard any clearer from heaven, I don't know when it would be. I sensed such a tremendous word from the Lord, calling back and telling me to do it. Oh, now the devil's speaking to me out here on the beach. I rebuke, no, this is not a thought of the Lord. This is something else. And here comes, so strong. You calling back and you telling me to do it. So I say, okay, boy, was I so certain. Pick up the phone, call him back. I'm in. You tell me what I need to do. We need you here by the end of the week. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I'm on vacation right now. I'm coming in. Well, the rest is history. I was actually doing church work and doing teaching school at the same time, both of which I never in a million years would have ever imagined. Never would imagine.
And now you're working with online students, and you are the online chaplain, and you are an online student.
An online student myself.
So how did that happen?
Yeah, so I think in years gone by, when I thought I would never use anything that I ever did with computers, in the early 2000s, when people were seeing, you can do a lot more on the internet than you could in the past. Always loved technology, and I've been an online student in 3 different programs, and now working on my doctorate online. And so it kind of gives me a little bit of a better perspective for our own online students. here at Southern Wesleyan, and I so value the richness of the online experience because I believe it's another platform that can be just as redemptive in its own right. And I think when we think a lot of Christians have tenuous relationships with technology, technology makes a great servant, but a terrible master. Mm-hmm. And I think exploiting it for what it does properly is fantastic. So I actually get to work with online students while being an online student. And this next step in education, much like you shared last time we were together, I see as an opportunity to not only be a very valuable tool in what the Lord has both now and in the future, which who knows what it may be. For this season that is now, I think it's so appropriate. Part of it is my own unquenchable curiosity and love for learning. And so that has worked into it well. I'm getting a doctorate in spiritual formation, something that's so interesting to me. And being able to practically apply that while I am serving online students as an online student has been a true blessing. Never in a million years would I have ever imagined. And in fact, when I started out with education, I thought, I'll do a 2-year degree, just get an associate's degree. My family education was valued, but not terminal degrees. Nobody in my family has a terminal degree. It was nothing that was really championed. We came up from a family that's really hardworking and great values, great morals, hardworking. And never in a million years would I have thought, I'm going to willfully go back and study some more. Well, now I can't stop. So here we are.
Okay. And you've talked about these different paths that you've taken, the different clearness committee moments. And so what that means to me is kind of like with my life, as I was sharing last time, there have been seasons and you have passed through these various seasons. So what does that mean to you personally? And what does that mean, do you think it means to God? And also, what potentially could it mean to those people who were listening?
Wow, excellent question. I had this mentality. When I was a freshman or sophomore in high school, they started talking about college. You've got to know what college you're going to go to. I thought, my goodness, it's so far in the distance. I don't even want to think about that right now. College years, you got to know what major you're getting into. You don't want to waste any time in college. And you got to know what major you're getting into and what you'll do after that. And so we took those diagnostic tests. One of them told me I should be a podiatrist. Don't know how that happened. No interest in feet. And I'm thinking, wow, got all these opportunities. What do I do? But I've got to make sure that I have the right decision, that I make the right decision when it comes to majors and job. And I thought, you select that, and then you're in for life. That's what you're going to do for life. And that was not overtly expressed, but I feel like it was kind of hinted at. You need to find something that you could see your life being spent on, a calling that you really stick to. And then I jump in and I had this shame. I'm graduate with a degree that I'm not going to use, that it seems at the time that I have no use for. And where is this certainty? I look around, I see people that are so certain in what they're going to do. I would have loved to have been an architect before I went to college. I thought, I'd do architecture. I really liked architecture. Also, thought I'd be a veterinarian, loved animals. I thought I could do that. All these options. And then I settled on kind of this traditional business route. And then lo and behold, I feel that I'm to do something otherwise. And so it was really a shock to my paradigm that you would do something and change course mid-journey. And in a way, I viewed that as failure in some part on my behalf. Man, I can't finish what I started. And for me, finishing what I started was, you spend your whole life in the business world and then you retire and, get an RV and, you're mobile, travel all over the country. And so, however, looking back, I realized that God operates in seasons, not in long-term call. He does with some people, and it's fine. It's not a problem. But to be able to hold what we have with such a loose grip that we can be easily moved by the Spirit's redirection. And for me, the goal became, I live before an audience of one. For all others, I have nothing to prove, nothing to gain, nothing to lose. Os Guinness said that in his book, The Call. And I said, okay, so now it's really just about pleasing the Lord, not about getting stuck in any one thing, and being free to be redirected by him. And so each changing season brought a renewed sense of faith's demonstration. How will I so readily accept what I feel like the Lord's leading to next? And being able to release the season that I was in to step into the next. And now looking back on it all, wow, it all makes sense from this perspective. Of course it makes sense. I love the outdoors, and oftentimes hiking up really steep mountains, you have these switchbacks on the trail, and you think, I'm going up there, but I'm going in this direction. It doesn't make sense, especially if you're in something that's heavily forested and you really can't see where you're going. You get to the top and you can make out the journey that you took, and it all made sense. I definitely couldn't go over there because it was a ravine, and I certainly didn't want to go over there because that was a sheer rock face. And then you get to the top and it makes sense. You can see everywhere you've been. And so often is that the case for everyone. And I think the meaningful part is that we recognize God's seasons and redirection, that he often will take us through a time of fulfillment and then say, once we've learned the lessons he has for us, then we're off to the next thing. And you're going to use something that you've already been through. And it may be a decade before that you experienced something that will shape you for now, but it's a constant moving forward in his kingdom. And I think for me, because a lot of people ask, as I did, how do you sense God's voice and his will? How do you know what is next for you? And there's this precious verse in the New Testament. This is the Scott Williams translation. Let peace be your umpire. And the Greek word is umpire. Let peace make your call like an umpire would at a baseball game. And using an inward peace to make a decision is the way we align ourselves with the witness of the Holy Spirit. And recognizing whatever God has for us next, we might not have blaring trumpets that direct us in one place or another, but as we're led by our peace, it opens the doors to what's next. And then that's just the season even still, and it opens the door to what's next. So I think for our students, if I could go back to Scott Williams, student in college, I would tell myself, soak up every opportunity that you can. You're not here just to get a grade. And that's what I spent 4 years trying to do. And really killed myself. Got a great grade. Didn't have much to show for it afterwards. It's a piece of paper. Come on. And I would tell myself, really experience as much as you can and take every opportunity, because it was in that taking every opportunity that new worlds were opened up. And so I think taking advantage of what is present with us now and seeing where God's moving in our day and in our season is so key, and being led by his peace.
Your last semester in college reminded me of a time in my life, and I described it then as feeling like all the anchors were pulled up and I was just adrift.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any wind for the sails. I was just drifting along, and I was hoping that things are going to, turn out okay. And Parker Palmer talks about it in terms of way closing. And we just lose the appetite for whatever it is that we were doing. And we just hope that there's something else out there. And we're not going to drift around for the rest of our lives, I wanted to read you a quote and see what you thought of this. This is from Plato's account called Phaedo or Phaedo of Socrates, and especially of his last days. And in particular, this quote is from Socrates on the day he was executed. He said, "When I was young, I had a wondrous desire for that wisdom which indeed they call inquiry into nature. For it seemed to me a magnificent thing to know the causes of each thing, on account of what has come into being and what has perished, and why something exists. And in the course of examining what it takes to exist, and regarding the heaven as well as the earth, in the end, I formed the opinion that I was naturally unsuited for this inquiry. Now, the thing that amazes me is that this is one of the greatest minds that has ever walked the planet. And we know Socrates because of his mind, because of his philosophy and that sort of thing. So here he was saying, basically, I just didn't have it in this area. And recognizing the limitation. And I was wondering if you can identify with any of that at any point in your life.
Yeah, every day.
Okay.
I'm unsuited for this. I just got finished with a book by Richard Rohr, The Naked Now. And he talks about the human condition and how we are constantly striving for something that's out there, even in the Christian world, trying to get to a point where when I get here, I know that I'll be pleasing to God. When I get here, I know I'll be fulfilling his will. And it's always something in the future. And he kind of pushed back against that, not in the perspective of stalemating progress or working towards something, but that's certainly valuable, but in the recognition that sometimes it's in our being before God and not necessarily our doing that we find our value and we find our true call. And it certainly stares down standard wisdom of following a clearly defined path. And I think per the quote you shared, the unsuitable nature of what we're about, there's a certain raw humility that's required that I think if a follower of Christ is to be truly open to him, we see that we are unsuited for the things that he has set before us, but not for him and for his animation of us. And I think for me, the moments that I felt shamed walking into something new in these different seasons, I'm not using a major that I should have been using. I'm starting in a field that I have no knowledge of whatsoever. I'm entering a seminary. Boy, that was tough, with people who have been in ministry for years. In my mind, I thought, why are you even here? These people already have all the answers. Starting in things that was very clear that the Lord had opened the doors to those areas, but feeling wholly unsuited, I think sometimes helps keep a humble balance of what the Lord has for us and keeps us in a posture where we can be molded by him. Otherwise, a rudderless ship is very difficult to direct.
Yeah, we're happy to talk about our strengths and not so much about our weaknesses. And interesting that in all these personality tests that we take and spiritual gifts tests that we take, we always focus on the strengths.
Sure. Yeah.
And we never really fully come to grips, with what about the rest of it? You know, my wife and I took a spiritual gifts test together years and years ago. And it taught us a lot, not because of what we were particularly strong in, but the fact that what I was strong in, she was weak in, and what she was strong in, I was weak in. And we realized that actually we're pretty perfect together, and complement each other. So I think there's a lot of good reasons to know why it is that you're not good at something. And when way closes, we're not beating on that door trying to get it back open again. But as Parker Palmer says, we turn around and we see what's in front of us.
Yeah. I think this reminds me of this a sort of losing of your passion or this door closing. I think we've read this verse wrong. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart. I used to think, man, you hang with him, he's going to give you the things that you've really been seeking and really been searching for. But in retrospect, I think that it is a giving of him to us of desires, or an awakening of desires in us that we didn't even know we had. And so I see these times of inadequacy and doors closing and sort of a lack of knowing the way, that in those times, if we really double down on our delight in him, he begins to place new desires in us or bring those desires to the forefront that help give us a steady step to what's next.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin.
So nice talking to you. Thanks so much. See you next time.